history. But that intelligent person at the city education administration who had spotted my parents in that settlement. Asked my father to conduct a sort of courses, seminars, whatever you might call them, for all those history teachers in the city, just to give them the rudiments of historical knowledge. And we had all those textbooks. My father couldn't read. So either my mother or myself, very frequently myself, he would ask us to read some of that stuff aloud to him. So I would read a part of Platonov, a part of Victor, and a part of Vinogradov, Russian history, ancient history, medieval history. There were teachers in various classes, and therefore he had to talk to them about different parts of the subject.
Mm-hmm.
So we were reading those to refresh his memory. And then he would talk to them, and they would take notes of what he was telling them. And then next week, our teacher would produce that in our class. I had read it to my father the week before. She was quite diligent. Didn't deviate very much, even though it was reasonably obvious that she hadn't a clue about what she was talking about. But she reproduced that stuff. She had taken it all. My father probably spoke rather slowly so that they could take all these. He had a very long teaching experience. So that was Karaganda. She later, we were still there. She later married another person in the educational field, a Tatar. I forget now what his name was. But before finally deciding to marry him, she spoke to my father. My father somehow always drew people to him. They somehow trusted him and sought his advice. And should she marry this? He was at the inspector, another inspector at the city education administration, and he was a Tatar, a Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how explicit that was, I don't know. They obviously liked each other, but there it is. My father thought that was all right for them to get married, so they did. We were still in Karaganda. He was transferred to Tajikistan it possibly was still called Dushanbe, not Dushanbe as now, Dushanbe. Perhaps already Stalinabad, but in normal conversation you wouldn't say Stalinabad, you wouldn't say Leningrad either normally, or Gorky for Nizhny Novgorod. He was appointed the head of the Goronov, the educational administration of the capital city. She came to London in, I suppose, late 50s, mid to late 50s, as a member of a educational delegation, and she was in Moscow, at the Ministry of Education now, in charge of preschool education in the RSFSR.
Mm.
And I didn't immediately, she was there on the podium, and I didn't immediately recognize her. So I didn't talk to her.
Oh dear.
It was my fault.
How unfortunate.
It was my fault.
Mm-hmm.
So I was there, sitting, watching, listening to all the rubbish that she had to say, and others.
Perhaps it's fortunate it might have caused her trouble at that time.
Yes, possibly. Yes.
What kind of education do you think you received under those circumstances?
An excellent education considering the circumstances. It was the second half of the 30s. Someone, still no one seems to know, I suspect Zhdanov, had talked Stalin into restoring education as well as various other what one might call normal social institutions, family, for example. Lenin and others, not just Kollontai, had done their best to try to destroy the family.
This was the great retreat of
It
Timoshev.
was the retreat of Timashev's great retreat. Yes, he was quite good. I had that book, of course, but I don't know where it is. I gave it to a student or whatever. Anyway, but it was a general great retreat, which was almost all of it was beneficial. Almost all of it. Not everything, but almost everything was beneficial. I suspect it was Zhdanov because Zhdanov had grown up in a teacher's family. His father was a secondary school gymnasium director in Mariupol, and he himself had just completed the gymnasium in Mariupol in 1917. Didn't receive any higher education. He plunged into revolutionary activities, joined the Bolsheviks in 1917 and so on, but he had received a proper secondary education, probably better than average, because his father had been director of that school. In some respects, he was similar to Lenin and Kerensky in this. And so he must have realized all the time it was wrong to destroy education. And he also was, even before Kirov's assassination, he's transferred to St. Petersburg and the official installation as one of the secretaries of the Central Committee, secretary in charge of culture. He already was, while he was in Nizhny, he already was the chief ideological person for a while for Stalin. Stalin, for some reason, liked his son, forced his daughter to marry Zhdanov's son at one point. So I rather suspect it's one of the tasks that I keep saying your pupils might undertake, but you're retired now and you are elsewhere.
I did spend some time in Zhdanov's archives. It's hidden.
But
I didn't.
not with this aim in mind.
No.
You were looking for Yaroslavsky stuff.
Well,
Pokrovsky, Yaroslavsky.
History, ideological work.
But not school, not education.
No, no.
Alas. Perhaps there will be someone fairly soon. who can is entangled there. Access to archives is becoming more and more difficult, I'm told, which is one point against Putin, the present.
Did I tell you that the Stalin archive from the presidential archive is now in Rishidny, and it will be open this fall? Archive as Ginsek.
Yes. Well, but it has been very uneven.
Yes.
Very uneven.
On this question of education, to confirm this, a friend of mine, who's he's Kushtrovet at the Hermitage,
Yes.
grew up in Saratov and was comparing the education she had in Saratov, which would have been in the 50s, 60s, with her daughter's education now in St. Petersburg, which is greatly inferior to her own education.
Yes, well, very well. And she's younger than I am.
Yes, would be post-war generation.
Yes. The idea was to make it rather close to the time when the Bolsheviks destroyed education. So much so that we had some textbooks in arithmetic, algebra, trigonometry, physics, that had been there already before 1917. The same authors slightly changed the text of the problems, let's say in algebra, was slightly changed. Instead of merchants, there would now be some Soviet substitutes for that. Kolkhoz instead of peasant or whatever. But the mathematical meaning of the problems would be the same, and the same in physics. So Marin Pavlovna's mother, and then Marin Pavlovna also had some of the same textbooks in Harbin. Yeah, and it was to such an extent that there was meant to be a considerable correspondence between the classes. The third class in secondary school, the second half of the 30s, was meant to correspond to the first class of a gymnasium. So the 10th class to the 8th class. And you could simply, in the French way, if you like, they could tell you in the Ministry of Education, as they say in Paris, what was being done at this moment at 10 o'clock in the morning in every sixth form of every secondary school in France. And Russian education had been to a considerable extent patterned, not directly after France, but after France via Austria. Under Catherine II and then Alexander I, it was the same person who had set up the secondary and primary education in Austria, secondary mostly, in Austrian Slav, who was invited to do the same in Russia after he had done that in Austria. And so, but the French example was so overwhelming then that everyone tried to imitate it. And so there were some things lacking. There were no classical languages. There were no people to teach them. They had all been short or starved or whatever. Almost all, not quite. because we had one of them at the university. He'd been a gymnasium teacher before he survived somehow, and he was there for Latin Greek at the university, the historical faculty at the university. As a result, I had 2 years of very good Latin teaching. I had was a we met twice a week for 2 periods each time, so 4 periods each week for 2 years. And I still have enough Latin. I hadn't had, well, my father obviously had quite a lot of sayings in Latin and proverbs and things like that I always heard. But
have we failed to ask you some questions we should about Karaganda?
I have a question. I'm still a bit confused about how you in particular would have grown as a historian from having, it appears, having heard or having repeated to you what you already knew.
yes. Well, I knew what the situation was.
Yes.
It wasn't. I knew what I was reading to my father for.
Yes.
What the purpose was.
Yes.
And so I could judge how closely she had followed
Yes.
that.
Yes. The other students would have benefited, but
I did.
You did.
Repetition. Repeating something is.
Could you find books elsewhere, any place? Any serious history books?
No.
No.
Just in our
Just in your
house, in our library. It was, and not until Moscow University. Not until Moscow and Zhdanov. It was impossible. Some books were being published, not textbooks, but some books were being published at the beginning of that time by the Academia publishing house that was headed by Kaniv. But then he was arrested and shot.
What about Shestakov's textbook? Did that come into your hands?
Yes, certainly. It was, when it came out, I forget now when, 35, 36, something like that.
At the earliest, I think.
Yes.
37.
It was possibly 37. It was made obligatory for all classes. Technically, it was for начальная школа, 3rd, 4th class or something like that. But since there were no textbooks, had to use it everywhere.
What sort of impression did it make on you?
Oh, it was nicely printed and nicely bound. and successive editions, it was reissued every year. Successive editions had fewer people mentioned in the last chapters. And we were following this, who you could expect, who had disappeared during the previous years, who therefore would no longer be there, who could check, and indeed they were no longer there. It was all ridiculous. But there was quite a lot of stuff, certainly better than anything that had been published under your friend.
Had you read Pokrovsky's works earlier?
Yes, we had his Русская история в самом сжатом очерке, that one volume.
Wasn't it 2 volumes?
Was
You had
it
a 1
2?
volume? It was 2, I think.
I thought it was 1, but possibly 2, I don't remember. Rather fast.
Yeah.
So I read that. But compared to Platonov, Ключевский, I remember your reaction when you first had to take whatever it was, the introductory Russian history course, 140 or something like that.
When I taught it.
When you taught it. And your reaction was, I remember it very well. Do you remember it?
No.
I hadn't realized how uninteresting Russian history could be made. you then read all these things and how uninteresting Russian history could be made. So, having grown up with my father and my mother, and with all these textbooks, I can't say I was very impressed, at least not positively impressed. Even by Shestakov, although I say Shestakov was already better on an elementary level, but already better. Certainly until the later parts of it.
Would you call yourself looking back? Would you call yourself precocious as a precocious as a historian?
Oh, I don't know.
Or would anybody have said anything about you?
Not in the sense in which Yevtushenko called himself precocious in his autobiography, a precocious in autobiography. Not in that sense. Well, I don't know.
This ability to judge at a rather young age.
I'm not a psychologist, a child psychologist. I can't judge that.
But it seems to us you must have been to be able to evaluate.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Textbooks at age. Most students just sort of swallow what's given to them.
Depends on circumstances, I suppose. I probably was ahead of. Well, I was ahead of many, but by no means of everybody. And I do remember people at the secondary schools in Kazan and Karaganda, and then the university who were certainly more gifted and better educated than I was.
I told you I met this fellow student of yours, this woman, I met her in Tallinn, and she remembered you as exceptionally bright. So I have to, this exceptional modesty in your memoirs, I have to counteract that.
What was his name?
Her name, I don't remember now. I met her son in Sweden in 1991, and I'm sure I reported that to you earlier. But
presumably you told me, but I did not remember. I didn't remember. But you met another classmate of mine, Uhler.
Yes.
We were closest friends.
Yes.
I think I was slightly ahead of him, but not very much. And there certainly were people we both knew who were ahead of both of us.
Well, I didn't ask him about you as a student. I didn't ask him if you were excessively modest or anything.
No.
No.
We were very close. Very close. I think I was slightly ahead of him. Even though he was a month older than I was. But he hadn't had the benefit of my parents. His parents were, as he put it, советские служащие, some sort of bureaucratic. So he hadn't had the benefit of that background.
Would you say that your parents provided you with some of your critical insight into these books, or it was largely your own?
Oh, both. Particularly my father, who spoke rather freely. But I started talking about Giverzon. He was born in 1928. His father was a medical professor. His mother was also a physician. They brought him up, realizing completely what was going on, without any trace of any of that tradition. And then he and his wife, who had also realized as a girl, and she grew up in Siberia, and first in the family there had been people who had been shot, and they had to keep quiet about them and things like that. And then she encountered quite a lot of exiles there. She said the best teachers were those who had been exiled from the city that was then abused by being called Leningrad. After Kirill's death, they were still there after the war when she was growing up. So they both realized what was practically all the time, that they brought up their children. Admittedly, it was an easier time, but still brought up their children. Completely normal people. We've met all of them. We've met all their children. Three daughters and a son. Their sons' parents, their sons' parents-in-law have been believers in all that rubbish.
Uh-huh.
And
for the record, would you identify them again? This is, you're talking about...
Gitelzon. And his son's parents-in-law had been believers in this rubbish, and they brought up their daughter in that faith. So very quickly, their son not only converted her, but her parents also. So they're all right-minded now.
Common sense.
Common
led
sense.
them to common sense.
And there are all sorts of little bits. Josef Vasilievich told me one experience. He had been born in Samara on the Volga, but was growing up in Podmoskovia, in Balashikha. And just one occasion, he said his mother was rather active in all this, was a deputy of the local Soviet and things like that. And at one point before the war, I forget now what happened, and she somehow reprimanded a military policeman. She said the Constitution, and he again, I don't now remember the actual wording, but the wording was beautiful about the meaninglessness of your Constitution.
Oh.
Meaningless.
My goodness.
And that was the Stalin Constitution. I realized perfectly well at the time in Karaganda that it was meaningless. I was teaching that Constitution in Anapa when I started teaching, but there I had in Karaganda I was made an agitator at the elections, the first elections to the Supreme Soviet of the USSR first, and then to the Supreme Soviet of Kazakhstan.
Oh, that's interesting. So you were
Yes. Oh, yes.
agitating that.
I was agitating, and I was agitating in one of those settlements of the banished people.
Rather awkward.
Who had, not for me, I knew perfectly well that they knew perfectly well that it was simply a game. So, the Stalin Constitution granted them the right to vote, which they hadn't had before. They had been deprived of that meaningless right to vote. Now, I was telling them how they had gained, had benefited from the Stalin Constitution. They had the right to vote. And invariably someone said, what about the passport? They had no passports. They were not allowed to travel anywhere. Had no passports. And So I extolled that right. My main task from the point of view of the authorities was to make sure that they actually went and voted, as it were. That is, there was just one name, one candidate that they received, and they were, since they were no passport, they had no passports. There was tens of thousands of people in each settlement. They had to be given sort of identity papers, just one paper saying that this is so and so. Oh, the date of birth, so that he was over whatever it was. It was 18 or something. That you had the right to vote. So, but so they are rounded up and actually went there on the election day. I had to try to round them up. I didn't vote. I was too young at that time, so I had no vote. But they had to vote.
All that energy and resources put into this ritual.
Yes, but it wasn't an empty ritual. It was Stalin. He quite obviously wanted to impress upon people how utterly powerless they were, that he could impose these fictions on them, on everybody, at every level, from very top to very bottom. Now the campaign mates actually didn't vote, but there's family members now voted, as it were, and the candidate for the Supreme Soviet of the USSR was the first secretary, of course, of the Karaganda, now Karaganda Party Committee, someone called Pinkhasik, originally from Belarus or somewhere, Jewish background, but he was told, we were given some stuff about his great achievements. I think we were told that Edward would tell our, how do you call a person being agitated? Anyway, that he had set up the mountainous Altai autonomous oblast sometime in the early 20s or something like that, which is now an Altai Republic, and they called the Subject Federации and all that. Anyway, I was relating all this to them, how distinguished a party member he had been, the young man there now. And there was such a personality cult of Pinkhasik. I remember there were just a few buildings in that new city, and just a block or so. There weren't actually blocks, but no streets really from us. There was that building where the provincial party committee and the provincial so-called Soviet administration were in the same building. But on the front wall of the building, there were two large portraits, Stalin and Pinkhasik. So that was the cult of personality at all levels, not just on Union Republic levels, but at all levels. So,
Sergei, I think you're taxing your voice.
Yes, well, let me just finish about the elections. And then next year, I think within a few months, there were elections to the Kazakh Supreme Soviet, and I had to extol the manager of the